Welcome back to Real-ationship Goals, a podcast all about exploring the realities and complexities of healthy relationships. Real-ationship Goals is a project of the Prevention and Education team at the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. If you or someone you know has experienced sexual violence or harassment and is seeking support services or needs more information, links to resources and our hotline number can be found in the description. The views expressed in this podcast are those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect those of their organizations or affiliates. Hey everybody, welcome back to Real-ationship Goals Season 6, Episode 9. We're so glad you're here. I'm Kyla.
I'm Ariana.
And I'm Maria.
Awesome. So we are going to just dive right into today's episode. We are covering special topics. So we're going to be talking about all things SAAM, or all things Sexual Assault Awareness Month. And I think Maria's going to kick us off.
Yeah, so when we talk about Sexual Assault Awareness Month, we know, the things that we can do in the terms of prevention on helping make sure you raise awareness about Sexual Assault Awareness Month, but I don't think a lot of us know the history behind it or how it came to be. So I did some digging and I got some information. So this April 2024 marks the 23rd anniversary of the National Sexual Violence Resource Center's Sexual Assault Awareness Month. But its history goes back a little bit longer. So the sexual assault and equality and social change has been historically something big. And the movements for social change and equality began to really gain some traction in 1940s and 50s when the civil rights era was happening. And people were talking about like sexual violence and domestic violence, and not that much. And so activists started to challenge that and saying like, hey, like this is something we definitely need to start speaking more about. And the people who were like pioneering this and like really advocating for this were Black women and women of color. So funnily enough, or interestingly enough, Rosa Parks was not only for the Black rights changes and things like that, but she was also advocating for the gender-based violence. And so there was a lot of intersectionality there and with other activists at that time. And so the first rape crisis center wasn't founded until 1971, and that was in San Francisco. 7 years later, it would be the city where the first United States Take Back the Night event was happening. So, and it just kind of started with that one center. It kind of started gaining a lot more traction. The next couple of decades, survivors and advocates would call for legislation and funding that would support survivors. And that's part of how we got VAWA in 1993, or the Violence Against Women Act, which is monumental to a lot of the work that we do, and even, huge life-changing for people who are needing to use that act. Mm-hmm. So SAAM was nationally observed for the first time in 2001, but before that, there had been events, marches, observances in the month of April, and it used to be Sexual Assault Awareness Week. And ended up changing because it's such a huge event. They were like, no, we need like a whole month for this thing. Mm-hmm. And so in 2000, like how they got the logo and things like that, in 2000, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and the Resource Sharing Project hold coalitions that were involved in sexual violence, and they were like, hey, like, what color and symbol do you want to use? And like what activities should we be doing and things like that. So from that poll, they showed that the movement preferred a teal ribbon as the symbol for sexual assault awareness, and that is how we know SAAM to be now and how it is shown. And kind of the evolution of SAAM throughout the years. In the early 2000s, the primary goal was awareness. So raising visibility for the teal ribbon, the meaning behind it, just establishing like the basics of like, hey, this is, when you see SAAM, this is what you'll see. But by the mid-2000s, SAAM started incorporating prevention a lot more and focusing on areas such as community, workplaces, and college campuses. And they would have different campaigns every year They would also do later on start branching out into Spanish speaking campaigns, and sometimes it would be the same as English, or they would kind of change the campaign for the Spanish speakers, just a little bit more to kind of reflect the culture better.
That's cool.
And so the SAAM, like you'll see if you look at different ones from 2000, from the 2000s, like you'll see the campaign as it changes, just how their like focus kind of shifts a little bit. But ultimately, you know, a large part of SAAM and why we celebrate it is to expand on education about healthy sexuality, consent, and bystander intervention. So that is SAAM looking back, and so looking forward, like there's only one way up for SAAM to continue to grow and change.
Mm-hmm. Most definitely. I like hearing that. I didn't know like how far back it started, but the significance of it is just like remarkable and impactful of how important this issue is to people, and it should remain that way and going forward, and how many more things and how much more education that there will be in the future in the future will be implemented into society. I feel like you will see better results when it comes to this topic in this month.
I always love my favorite part of every time like we cover like an awareness month or just like a month-long thing on here. I always love hearing it started off as a week and then they were like, nope, it needs more. Because I feel like that's happened with pretty much everything.
We covered it for Black History Month.
Black History Month, and I'm pretty sure Women's History Month also originally started as a week, and everybody was like, there's not really enough time to cover all of this in a week, so we really need a month. Eventually it'll turn into Sexual Assault Awareness Year. Say. Can't wait for that day.
Yes. But yeah, I was kind of like reading through it because I was thinking, I was like, we do a lot of the work, but like, how did it start and like who started and things like that. And so kind of as I was researching a little bit and reading more about the history behind it, it was like really neat to see how like the intersectionality, like I'd mentioned, they didn't come up with the term for that until like after Rosa Parks.
Yeah.
Thank
you,
and
Kimberly Crenshaw.
look at you. And yeah, and it's really neat to see how it's kind of evolved throughout the years, how it was just like, hey, like this is what we look like, and then like, hey, this is what we're doing. Like, get with it.
I also love the shift from like purely awareness into more, I don't want to necessarily say intentional, because there can be intentionality in awareness, but to including like prevention, and it's less like, hey, this is happening, and it's more, here's what you can do. Here's how you can make a change. Here's how we can be the change. And I think that's cool.
Yeah, and like just the shift in focusing on like societal changes and norms and beliefs and attitudes that could lead to the perpetration of sexual violence, which is what the Advocacy Center Prevention Team really focuses on.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I always love learning the history of different stuff. It's fun. And I think Ariana has something super cool and awesome to share with us also.
Yes, I do. So another significant part of April Sexual Assault Awareness Month is Denim Day. And so I will be speaking on that and the origin of it. So Denim Day this year is on April 24th of 2024. It is on a Wednesday. So its origin is like it's on a Wednesday. I don't know if it's like the third Wednesday of this month. So that is that. And so now I'm going to tell you the story behind how this became. So the Denim Day story begins in Italy in 1992 when an 18-year-old girl was raped by her 45-year-old driving instructor who was taking her to her very first driving lesson. He took her to an isolated road, pulled her out of the car, removed her jeans, and sexually assaulted her. So she reports the rape, and the perpetrator is arrested and prosecuted. He is then convicted of the rape and sentenced to jail. Years later, he appealed the conviction, claiming that they had consensual sex, The Italian Supreme Court overturned the conviction and the perpetrator was released. A statement from the court argued that because the victim was wearing very tight jeans, she had to help him remove them, and by removing the jeans, it was not rape, but consensual sex. And so this became known throughout the entirety of Italy as the jeans alibi. Enraged by the verdict, the women in the Italian parliament launched a protest wearing jeans on the steps of the Supreme Court. This protest was picked up by the international media, which inspired the California Senate and Assembly to do the same on the steps of the Capitol in Sacramento. Hattie Ochizu Giggins, if I said your name wrong, I am very sorry, which is the executive director of Peace Over Violence, saw this in the media and thought everyone should be wearing jeans to protest all of the myths about why women and girls are raped. Denim Day in LA was born. The first Denim Day in LA event was held in April of 1999 and has continued annually since. Yes. So that is the significance of Denim Day. And I just think it's remarkable, and it shows how much community connectedness comes into play with this, with all the women in Italy coming together and wearing jeans and just acknowledging the fact that this is not okay. This is quite ridiculous that this is being overturned, and it is never the survivor's fault for being assaulted. And it kind of just touches on how sometimes, and most of the time actually, how victims are blamed for what has happened to them. But it's a lot of advocacy and support and care for survivors, and I think that's really important because I think survivors, when they go through things like this, they need to hear those words. They need to know that there are people out there that support and believe them and are behind them.
I remember hearing about this when I first started here, and I was looking at the social media kit that we give out to our partners, and I was looking at it and I saw the brief history and I was like, what? And I remember looking into it more and I was just like appalled. And so every time I hear the story of it, I'm still like just baffled at how somebody was like,
It just burns.
right?
It burns on the inside, just hearing how that statement was just easily put out. Like, oh, well, since you had on these, you might as well have had to help them take them off. And it's like, no, that is not the case at all.
Like a huge part of our work is like believe and support survivors. And
Yes.
so like that was very much not
no.
a moment.
No.
Or just the whole thing is heartbreaking. Heartbreaking thinking about what that survivor endured. And then also heartbreaking to think of the shame and humiliation that was forced on her with the overturning of his guilty verdict. And it just feels very indicative of how both, I want to say, easy and prevalent victim blaming is. But at the same time, it also highlights, I think, how ridiculous and far-fetched a lot of like victim blaming tendencies are.
I think this one was very far-fetched. That I'm like,
It's insulting, yeah, for sure. I don't want to say but because there is no but to this. There is no like other side to that. It's more of like insulting and ridiculous and heartbreaking, period. New sentence. I am deeply inspired and in awe of the solidarity shown by the women in the Italian parliament to make that stand and make that public declaration. I think that that's incredible. And I hope that that was able to provide even just the slightest bit of comfort to that survivor, just like it provides comfort to so many survivors now. And I think it's so cool that we're able to hold the weight of this origin for this day, so that we can carry it forward with new understanding and new, I guess, like reverence for like what it is. Because Denim Day can also, like, it can be a fun thing to do. There are fun ways that you can engage in it, but at the same time, I also think it's important for us to remember to hold reverence for where this has started from too. So I think that lots of stuff. I think lots of stuff.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly, and I think kind of looking at what the culture was like then surrounding victim blaming and kind of what it is now, like we've definitely since then have taken such amazing strides in realizing that victim blaming is never okay, was never okay, will never be okay. And just kind of how our mentality is as a society is like, hey, like do better, be better, you know?
For sure.
Always on the positive side.
Yeah. Yes. Ooh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely a very needed history for sure. And then I am going to share a lot about 1.5 pages about the Me Too movement, which is now kind of commonly, I think, referred to as like hashtag Me Too, but the hashtag is actually only just a really small part of the movement. So I'll just dive right in. But the Me Too movement was founded by survivor and activist Tarana Burke in 2006. The movement was started and inspired by a moment that Burke shared with a participant at a youth camp where she was serving as a counselor, where the student attempted to share her experiences of sexual violence with Burke. But because of some complicated personal emotions and just kind of like the inability to process through those in that moment, Burke cut off the student as she was sharing and redirected her to another female counselor for help. And that moment of severing that connection left a significant impact on her. And in a personal statement, she says, "As much as I loved her, I could not muster the energy to tell her that I understood, that I connected, and that I could feel her pain. I couldn't help her release her shame or impress upon her that none of it was her fault. But most of all, I could not find the strength to say out loud the words that were ringing in my head over and over again. As I stood there, I couldn't even bring myself to whisper the words circling in my mind and soul, me too." And because of that moment and because of how that sat with her, the Me Too movement was born. In its early days, much of the work went toward developing a vision to provide resources and support and pathways to healing where they didn't exist before for survivors. And then another focused effort by the movement was building a network of community advocates to interrupt sexual violence wherever it occurs. And then in October of 2017, I believe on October 15th specifically, the Me Too movement went viral as actress Alyssa Milano tweeted, quote, "If you've been sexually harassed or assaulted, write Me Too as a reply to this tweet." And then she included an image of text that read, "Me Too, suggested by a friend. If all the women who have been sexually harassed or assaulted wrote Me Too as a status, we might give people a sense of the magnitude of the problem." And within 24 hours, Milano's tweet had received 12 million responses on social media within 24 hours. A little repetitive, but 12 million. And then this is just a fun fact that I found somewhere. Between October 16th, 2017 and September 30th, 2018, the hashtag MeToo was used 19 million times, which is both incredible and horrifying. So that's just really interesting. And then while the online response was significant and incredible, there were also major changes occurring in offline spaces too that continued to occur. Some continued changes since that viral tweet include campaigns against sexual violence in numerous spaces and industries, including film, music, politics, education, sports, military, and medicine. Legislative and legal action, including the Me Too Congress Act, affirmation for survivors that they are not alone, creating stronger communities and uplifting survivor voices, impacting social norms and opinions about sexual violence, such as creating a culture shift that has made people more open to having conversations about sexual violence, and also destigmatizing as well. So working to release that like shame that is so deeply intertwined with sexual assault. Increased compassion for survivors, highlighting systemic issues and the need for more formal anti-harassment policies, and the creation of the Time's Up Legal Defense Fund, which has provided legal representation for thousands of survivors. The Me Too movement is still alive and well and continues to do incredible work to create an environment of empowerment and healing for survivors. You can learn more about them at metoomovement.org, spelled METOOMVMT.org, and there will also be a link to the website in the description. Some resources that can be accessed through the website include the Survivor Sanctuary, which is 36 different self-guided digital lessons between 5 to 25 minutes long. You can access modules created by Black, Indigenous, and Brown practitioners that explore creating affirmation practices, breathing exercises, and compassionate self-touch. And then additionally, there's healing toolkits available and a healing resource library. And then there are also opportunities to donate and help further the work being done by the Me Too movement. So, very cool. I would highly recommend checking out the website for sure.
Thank you for sharing that so much. Like, I remember the Me Too movement when I was like either like at the tail end of high school or at the after high school, and when it was like really becoming sensationalized with all these stuff with celebrities coming out, you know, the Woody Allen and the Bill Cosby and everything like that. And
Harvey Weinstein.
yes. And like all these people, and there were so many other things culturally that were happening in that time that just amplified that. And I remember kind of going through the hashtag on Instagram and reading some of the stories and just being like so impacted by it, because these are things that like you don't think, right? Like you don't think somebody else has gone through something as horrific. You know people have gone through it, but you never think like, oh, like that person has also been through it or this and that. And so it's just kind of I think it helped build kind of like a sense of like affirmation or affirmed to other people that like they're not alone in this, and kind of built like a sense of community for those who have gone through sexual assault. And so the whole like history behind it and everything is so neat to know, because it just really shows that like it takes one person to like stand up and then create this whole movement, which still continues to like inspire others and give other people a space for their story to be heard.
And something cool that I read also is that like Toronto Book has accepted kind of like the label of like leader or creator that other people have put on her, but I think something that I read is that she always refers to herself as a worker in the Me Too movement. So I just very much admire just her humility through that, and forever want to take the time and the effort to acknowledge her in this movement, because I definitely think sometimes the incredible and intentional work and advocacy work specifically that's done by Black women gets greatly overshadowed a lot of times. So just giving her a special shout out. Tarana Burke, thank you for all that you've done. Just definitely want to be intentional in that space, but yeah, it's whew. All right. Any other thoughts before we hit our relationship goal? No thoughts. Head empty. All right.
Vibes.
Yeah. All right. Well, Maria has got our relationship goal for us today.
Yeah. So for those of you who can see, I'm going to be assuming a position for what I'm talking about. So active listening, right? I've just scooted forward in my seat, kind of closer to the audience. So when you do active listening, it's not just about like listening to respond. It's about listening to take in the information, and it's just kind of to reflect on it. And so ways that you can show it is physical, your body, kind of leaning in, making eye contact. If eye contact isn't your thing, I don't like looking at people in the eyes when I talk, because I feel like I'm just staring into their souls. Just showing that you're attentive in other ways, you know, like nodding your head or shaking your head appropriately. The way that you're, you know, if your arms are crossed, that shows that you kind of closed off. And And then, you know,
Help me
what? I'm sorry. I know you. You're actively listening. And just kind of being respectful of them, making sure you're not on any devices or anything like that, are all ways that you can show active listening. And when you show active listening, you can help strengthen your relationship with other people. And it just kind of shows that, like, you're here, you're in the moment, and you really care about what they have to say. So you're gonna see me bent over like this forever now.
Really leaning in. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And then I have our recommendation for today, which is take a little bit of extra time to text somebody that you care about a random "I love you," because it's very meaningful. And I think the random "I love yous" sometimes carry a little bit of extra meaning, because it also just shows that you're thinking about them. So text a family member, text a friend, text your boss, ? Maybe not. You determine what an appropriate relationship to convey your care is in that way. And just want to encourage you to always be mindful about telling the folks in your life how much you appreciate them.
You should check your phone, Kyla.
Oh, feeling so loved. But that's all from us for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. We will be taking a quick pause, so you won't hear from us next week, but then we will be back the week after that. But in the meantime, if you are really wanting some more Advocacy Center content, you can follow our big agency accounts on Instagram or Facebook at Advocacy Waco. Or if you're really enjoying P&E, come follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention. But in the meantime, we will see you in 2 weeks. Bye.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Real-ationship Goals. This episode was produced by the Prevention and Education Department of the Advocacy Center for Crime Victims and Children in Waco, Texas. Interested in more content from P&E or the Advocacy Center? You can follow us on Instagram at ACCVC_prevention or on Instagram and Facebook at Advocacy Waco. Be sure to like this episode and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time. Bye.